Hello everyone and welcome back to KSP episode 41. Now, first off, apologies are due to the last episode, episode 40. I recorded the was not plugged in. However, in the comments section you can see a brief rundown of everything, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions pertaining to that episode in the comment thread. The mission itself and the episode itself is pretty self-explanatory, but just a quick roundup and review. We finished by resetting all the struts from the mid section here up to the upper section and strutting up the new probes that we attached to the vessel. Then we launched it from the MUN after setting up a transfer window to Joule. We put it in a MUN orbit, same as always. Did the transfer to Joule, the same as always. The only difference is we put ourselves close to Laythe's orbital line whenever the information around Laythe on the way. Upon arrival, we put ourselves in orbit around Joule between Laythe's orbital line and in between Tylo and Bop out here. Then we corrected the ascending node to match Laythe's orbital inclination around Joule and brought the, I believe it was the apoapsis, down until we got an encounter with Tylo, which allowed us to slingshot around Tylo into a Laythe encounter at about 80,000 kilometers or so, and then we brought ourselves into a nice, stable 70,000 meter orbit around Laythe. And along the way, once we entered the space around Laythe, we grabbed the space high above Laythe science, and then made our way down here, put ourselves in orbit, and finished up by grabbing the science from the space near Laythe, and here we are. And we are now prepared to put the station core into orbit here around Laythe and deploy the surface as well as the splashdown probes to land here at Laythe, and then return this vessel back to Kerbin with the science that we garnered in the space around Laythe, while also knocking out the orbital EVA and making orbit around Laythe portion of this contract. And so let's pick back up where we left off. Now I'm going to update the quick save one more time real quick before we begin. I'm going to start off by deploying these probes, which is... No, they're not. Okay, they are up here. If I'm not mistaken, let's get a good view to where we can see those TT. I guess they're the 80 or 38K decouplers. We will take that stage and bring it down here, and then we'll update the quick save again before we decouple those and let those begin to drift away from our vessel. And we'll start the missions off by getting those probes down to the surface of Laythe. And here's the fun part. They're both set up the same, so it doesn't matter which one's first, so we're going to do the splashdown first, since that will be the easiest. And before we lose control of this vessel, we need to extend these 4 tiny little Communitron 16s that are a bit expendable, to be honest. That's why we're going to extend those, and if they happen to burn up in the atmosphere, they burn up in the atmosphere. Hopefully we won't lose control of the probe along the process of doing that, so we can then extend the Communitron 88 by 88 antenna once we are close to splashing it down and we have our parachutes deployed. We'll begin by making sure we are in surface mode and point ourselves retrograde and stage the engine and throttle up. And that'll put us into suborbital flight over Laythe, knocking that accomplishment out. before we continue any further, that we do need to swap to this other probe and make sure that its communitrons are extended as well. We'll just go ahead and extend this one for now, and then when it's time to return to that and land it, we can retract it and then extend these other 4 smaller communitrons and send it on its way, hopefully towards some land. Hopefully the game's not about to crash. Okay, there we go. Now, let's continue where we left off with this one. Put it back to retrograde. We are going to burn off as much of this speed as possible. Looks like we have enough to pretty much cancel it out entirely, but we're not going to cancel it out entirely. We're going to bring it down to about, say, 800 meters per second or so, relative to the surface. And then we will begin to enter the atmosphere at about 50,000 meters, where the Kármán line is for Laythe, and try to keep its speed as low as possible in an attempt to not burn up any of this stuff while we're making entry into the atmosphere, most especially the landing gear here. And if that goes well, we will know that we can do that for the one that's supposed to land on the surface, but I digress. Let's go ahead and now time warp down close to the atmosphere. Let's also make sure to get our resources menu open and go ahead and start trying to transmit some of this atmospheric data. Let's also begin to burn the rest of our fuel while we're doing this. Looks like it broke that antenna, that's not good. And did it break the other antennas? I believe it did. Okay, so we are antennaless. Now we're pretty much just relying on the communication ability of the probe core itself. But I believe we'll be okay. And try to maybe retract that. No, it's not going to let us. Well, here comes the fun. Did it allow us to transfer or transmit any of that data? That's a good question. No comms devices. Yikes. Okay, let's reload that quick save, because we want to make sure that we have comm devices on this thing. So once we reload this quick save, we will make sure to not transmit any of that data just yet. Or we may be able to try to transmit it with the smaller communitrons instead of allowing it to deploy that one larger communitron. We will figure this out though. Shouldn't take too much to figure it out. I should already be ready to stage the probes as soon as it reloads. And once it does, we'll extend the larger communitron on the one, then the smaller 4 communitrons on the one that we're going to use as the splashdown probe, and try that again. If necessary, we can just keep the atmospheric data until we land, and then transmit it, to be a little more safe about it. Okay, now, let's go ahead and we'll just extend the large one on this one since it's a little harder to see. And we'll swap over to the other one and extend the 4 small ones on this one. I'm going to hold the R1 or right shoulder button on the Xbox and just hit square, or I believe it's X on the Xbox, to open all these and try to get this done a little more quickly to save time. Let's just extend all those together. And then close that. Point ourselves retrograde relative to the surface. Hopefully we won't smash into our vessel. Looks like we should be clear right about now. So let's stage and activate that engine. Let's cancel that. Throttle. since we were awfully close to that vessel. Then we'll continue to retroburn now that we're away from it. And let's just bring that down to, say, about here to get a better angle. Well, no, a little more, because we still want to be on the day side. Let's bring that down just a wee bit more. As soon as it gives us control back. We're pretty far away from the vessel now, so now it's trying to close out all those parts and the buffering. Now we have no lag really because we are far enough away. I'm going to continue to burn that down just a wee bit more to make absolutely certain that we are still left. Let's go ahead and time warp closer to the Kármán line and quickly grab the data before we transmit this time. Let's see if it's going to break those. Okay, so it did break those, so we're just going to keep that data for now. We can grab the atmospheric data from the upper atmosphere with this one, and once it lands, transmit it, and then transmit the surface splashdown data. Then we can use the other one to grab the flying at Laythe data, and then the actual surface data after transmitting that. These do have nukes in it, so we can set it to partial transmission, so it keeps going until it finishes, keeping power the whole time. We're just going to keep burning this. Looks like the heat shield wasn't even really necessary in this case. But keep burning until it reduces all of its speed. Let's go ahead and set up our staging now. We need to separate those two larger parachutes from these radials. And we'll put those right here. Make sure that decoupler is last. Let's go ahead and separate the parachutes. And we can go ahead and time warp to burn through that fuel a little faster. Let's cancel the throttle before it hits 0. And let's throttle back up until we burn all that out. Cancel the time warp. Guess it would be a good time to go ahead and decouple now, though. Let's go ahead and do that. Move that decoupler down to the next stage, let that go. Let's deploy the landing gear. Not just yet. We'll wait until the drogue chutes deploy, and we'll activate the main chutes, and then we will deploy the landing gear. And we will not open that communotron until we land. Make sure that is set to retrograde. Okay, now that those have deployed, we'll just wait till we're a little closer to the ocean surface to deploy those main chutes. Say at about 500 meters, we will cancel the time warp and then stage to open those. Check our surface speed out. It's kind of high. We have the heat shield here to act as a buffer just in case, but we can also deploy these to also act as a buffer. So those will get destroyed, and maybe the heat shield if it's too rough of a landing, keeping the probe intact. Let's also set that to radial out. That way it stays pointing up once it lands here in just a moment. Looks like everything is intact. That's good. Just waiting to get a better view of everything here. It's a little hard to see, so we'll just zoom in. Let's go ahead and extend this communotron before we lose contact with this probe. And then set it to allow partial, and then transmit the data. Let's check our energy. Alright, so all that's done, so now we can get this splashdown data. Let's log the temperature Then we'll get the barometric pressure reading. We should have grabbed a mystery goo from the upper atmosphere. Forgot about that. Whoopsie. Let's grab that. Let's get the seismic data. It won't let us do it since we're not on land. We should be able to get some gravity data though. And that'll wrap up all that. So now we can transmit that data. Transmit all. It may run out of power, but it does have a nuke, so it'll refill its gauge as it's still transmitting since it's set to partial. You can close that and just let it do its thing. Once that is complete, that'll pretty much knock out our little splashdown probes mission, as it is descending down below the surface now, going down to the bottom of the ocean. Good thing it has a nuke though. Okay, now let's reactivate the SAS, make sure it's pointing radial out. That way when it gets down to the bottom of the ocean, it lands. We have gathered the first scientific data from Laythe, splashed down in the oceans of Laythe, into the atmosphere, and atmospheric flight above Laythe, and suborbital space flight above Laythe. Let's get rid of that. And let's watch this thing descend and see just how far down it's gonna go. I guess it's not really gonna go any lower than that. So I guess we'll just leave it there and update the quick save before we do this. I need to set up a surface landing for the other probe now, which can be a little tricky. And hopefully it's still maintaining communication. Looks like it's got good communication with everything, so that's fantastic. Let's switch to this probe now and try to find a good spot where there is a surface to land on. Then after we're done with that, we'll deploy the station core here in orbit, and then return our kerbals back home from orbit of Laythe and find out what's in store for us next. I'm going to predict that it's probably landing on the surface of Laythe with a manned crewed mission to plant a flag, deploy our breaking ground science modules, and return from the surface. But we shall see. Now, let's see. Let's first update the quick save before we do this. Let's close the larger communitron here and see if we lose signal, sorry. And we did not. That's good. Let's go ahead and extend these 4 smaller ones just in case we happen to lose signal at any point in time. Try to prevent that. Now it's time to find a good spot to land this thing. May need to wrap back around, maybe try to land it there by burning anti-normal and bringing that down to that. Or we can attempt to land at the northern pole if we have enough delta V to move it there. But we'll begin by just wrapping it back around to this side of Laythe and then trying to alter its trajectory to land on that little surface there. We'll try for that. We are going to lose signal shortly because the relay station is also going to lose signal here in a moment. Oh, didn't lose it because of the distance. That's good. Alright, let's prepare to cancel that time warp out here shortly. Say right about now. Let's begin to burn anti-normal. Let's go ahead and stage our engine. Go back to the map view. And let's bring that down while keeping an eye on our fuel resource menu. Once that is over top of this landmass, we'll be ready to retro burn once we get a little closer to it. I'm going to try to get it to where it's going to cover as much landmass as possible and that overall descent line, which means we will cut our engines off right about point ourselves retrograde. We're going to bring that down till it's at, say, there should be a good starting point. But we need to make sure that we can kill all of that velocity while we're over top of that landmass. Let's keep an eye on our probe's altitude as it makes its way down there. Hello! Hope you're enjoying the series and hope you enjoy the episode. Now let's begin to burn off more of our orbital velocity and make sure that we are pointing towards surface and surface mode, or pointing towards retrograde and surface mode. Let's try to nail down this descent. We're going to put the end of that line in line with the end of this little island here. Should definitely have enough delta V to do that. At the moment, yeah. Usually most people end up watching it after I'm done streaming. A few people might pop into the chat while I'm streaming the episodes though. We are very close to having that at the tip of the island. Once it's there, we will cut our engines off. That way we can guarantee a surface landing. A little bit more. There we go. Alright. Now let's time warp ahead just a wee bit until we start to enter the atmosphere. Then we will reignite the engine. And we need to make sure to grab the mystery goo from the upper atmosphere this time, since we forgot with the splashdown probe. And we are going to lose these communitrons, but we have our relay station up here to help maintain contact. Let's now go ahead and stage and get rid of the fuel tank. Swap back to the probe. And there goes the antenna. Let's make sure that we are still pointing retrograde relative to the surface and surface mode. Let's rotate the vessel for a little bit more of an even burn as we make our entry. May not be much of a burn since we killed off much of that surface velocity. So we can go ahead and time warp a little bit through the entry. Pretty fantastic. We do need to separate those two larger radial chutes that were down here from those drogues. Bring those up here. And let's let that surface speed continue to reduce until we're a little closer to the surface. Then we will cancel the time warp, stage those drogue chutes, and now that we are flying above the surface, let's grab the temperature reading while flying at Laythe, and the barometric pressure reading while flying at Laythe, and I believe that's all the signs we can get while flying at Laythe. Yep, it's not going to let us grab the gravity data, so we'll keep that until we land. Let's go ahead and time warp down closer to the surface a little more. And once we're nice and close, we will cancel the time warp, activate the larger drogues, make sure that we are pointing radial out, and then activate our landing gear by holding L1 or the left shoulder button on the Xbox and hitting square, or I believe it's X on the Xbox. And then we'll time warp down to our right on top of the surface, and then we'll cancel the time warp and land this probe. Cancel it right about now. Let it land. Looks like we lost one landing leg. That's okay though. Now we can deactivate the landing gear, turn it a little bit, and reactivate the landing gear. Let's deactivate the SAS, then activate it. That'll be a little more stable. Okay. Now, let's open our communitron here and enable our brakes as well. And then we will set this communitron to transmit from partial. go ahead and transmit the data that we have. Once that's done, we will begin to grab our surface data. Let's grab the gravity reading, grab the mystery goo, grab the seismic reading. Since we are on the surface, it will let us grab that this time. Grab our temperature reading, our barometric pressure reading, and let it transmit that data now. And it will run out of power, but thanks to the nuke on board, it'll keep regaining power as it continues to transmit the data. It's almost back at full antenna charge. Finish that one. Let's just go ahead and time warp until it completely finishes transmitting all of that data. Once that's done, we'll see our electrical charge start to build up a lot more rapidly, which it should be doing right about now. Okay, let's cancel the time warp. All of that is done. This probe is officially done with its mission now. I see a geyser over there. That's interesting. Any other nearby surface features? Not seeing anything. Well, that's it for the probes. Looks like those are done. This one's still splashed down. Nice and safe. Alright, so now let's update our quick save and then swap back to our primary vessel so we can deploy the station core. And then get these Kerbals back home from orbit around Laythe. We'll also check out our accomplishments once we load back up with our main vessel before we return home. Gonna do a check over of our station as well to make sure that it's good. Now let's check those accomplishments. We have landed on the surface of Laythe. Fantastic. Alright, now let's time warp until we're back in the day side so we can see what we're doing. Those are maintaining contact pretty well, thanks to our two other relay stations that we have here around the Joule system. Coming into the day side now, let's cancel that time warp. Let's see what those stations are looking like. Wonder what the deal is with the Tylo station. Let's zoom in and find out. Interesting that it's not connecting to anything. Wonder what's going on there. May just be where it's not on the day side. Let's find out. I want to make sure though. As soon as it hits the day side, it should start getting power. Okay, yeah, it's reconnecting now. Looking good. Alright, let's refocus on our primary vessel. Still on the day side, fantastic. Alright, let's go to our vessel view. And let's check out our station before we deploy it. Let's rotate so we can get a good view of that. Let's also rotate this way so the panels are pointing where they should be pointing. Try to get this more in line with that 90-degree inclination before we deploy that so it stays there, ready and waiting in an equatorial orbit. Alright, now let's focus our view on anything related to the station core itself. Let's take a look-see. Everything is deployed, lights are on, looking good to go. Let's update our quick save and undock that station core. Before we do though, we may be able to go ahead and try to transfer. Let's highlight the hatch and transfer a Hellwig there into the station. Just gotta find a good spot to do that. There we go. Okay, that does not knock out the transfer between two vessels. Huh. Alright, so let's find the crew hatch, transfer, and get Hellwig back on our command pod. And go ahead and decouple the command pod from the station. Then we will go to docking mode, activate our RCS, and boost the station away a little bit, and then cancel that velocity. Very good. Let's deactivate the RCS, go back to staging mode, and swap to our main vessel. We have tons of Delta V here. Surprising. It's a really good transfer vessel. Alright, let's point ourselves. First, let's go to the map view and come back so we can reset the nav ball. And then point ourselves prograde. Let's rotate the vessel to where the panels are north and south. And we are waiting for that to get out of the way so we can get out of the same orbit of this station. In fact, let's go to docking mode, activate our RCS, and try to push away from the station with our RCS now. Then deactivate the RCS, go back to staging mode, and wait for that now, which we can do by time warping. Once it's clear of the station's line of sight, we'll lock back on to prograde, and let's make sure that we are going to clear it before we come back to map view. Once it's set to prograde, we'll thrust forward just a little bit, cut it off before our engines affect our station core there. Once we're far enough away, we'll cut that back on. Let's highlight our periapsis and apoapsis and increase the apoapsis out to about 100,000. Then we'll time warp over to it and stabilize our orbit at 100,000 by 100,000. Once we have that, we will set up our trajectory to return to Kerbin and wrap this mission up. Just wait for that to reorient back to its prograde lock, and we'll stabilize this orbit and begin our journey home with entirely too much Delta V. Let's rotate, make sure that our solar panels are lined up to where they need to be. And let's get that periapsis out to 100,000. There we go, close enough. And now we can set up our return window. Let's find out where Kerbin is, set it as our target. How much time warping can we do in this? Okay, not too much. Let's go to the tracking station and set up that return window so we can find out what is in store for us in the next mission, and we can spend some of the remaining time in this episode to prepare for that, perhaps. And if need be, I'll extend it for that. That way in the next episode we can just get straight to the mission after we find out what that's going to be. Since we are playing a little liberally with our time here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this space junk and reclassify the station as a station. Two more to recover from the surface of the Mun. Those are the launch clamps. Then we just have a little bit of debris to get rid of. Okay, that takes care of the recovery portion. Now let's just get rid of the 5 pieces of debris here. Two to go. One to go. And then now we just need to reclassify the station real quick. Make sure this is the station. Should be. 70 by 70. Yep, that's the station. Alright. Highlight the info panel. Double tap the name. Close the stick in. Triangle or Y on the Xbox. Designation station. X or A on the Xbox to accept it. Stick in for the mouse. Close the information panel, sorry. And there's our ship. Ready to come home. We just need to set up our orbit. Let's refocus on Kerbin, cycling through with the shoulder buttons until Kerbin is highlighted. And then let's enable the time warp and zoom out. And rotate Kerbin back around until it's at the end of its orbital line and the communication line is flush with Joule on the other side of its current location. And once it's there, we'll refocus on Joule, make sure Laythe is where it needs to be, and come on home. And if I had to guess, I'm going to say that Laythe is going to be our 10th flag in the next episode. Be it a colony, if it's only asking for us to land and that's it, or it'll be a return from the Surface of Laythe mission, if it asks for that. Alright, we are quickly approaching our destination in Kerbin's orbit relative to Laythe for the transfer window. We're just waiting for that line to line up with the edge of Kerbin's orbit. And Kerbin will be at the edge of its orbit right about there. So let's cancel our time warp. And cycle over to Laythe. Zoom in. Let's actually put our focus on Joule. Looks like that needs to wrap around a little bit, so let's activate our time warp until Laythe wraps around. Let's slow down the time warp right about now. And then we will cut the time warp right about now. Then we will refocus on Laythe. Find out where the vessel is. We need to wrap that vessel around Laythe a little bit more. Pretty much where it's going to be on the other side of Laythe from where it was just a second ago. Right about where the station is right about now. We'll stop it right about there and then return to our vessel. And it should be very close to where it needs to be already, but we did leave it a little bit of distance so we can prepare for this. Once this loads up, we will be underway. Alright, so let's point ourselves prograde quickly. And then zoom out, make sure that Kerbin is our target. Looks like it already is. That's good. So let's make absolutely sure. Looks like Eve is our target for some reason. Let's unset that. Try to get a beat on Kerbin. There we go, let's set that as our target. And that prograde mark is almost in line with our target mark. Almost got this nailed down perfectly. Let's check Joule's orbital line in relation to Kerbin. It's looking good. How about Laythe? Laythe is good. Just about. Pretty much perfect. And we can go ahead and time warp ahead until that target mark is starting to dip into the retro or prograde mark a little better. And looks like everything's good to go. How about our panels? They need to be north and south. Let's rotate until it's there. Good. Alright, let's slowly throttle up. And prepare to stage. Let's go ahead and stage now. Go back to our map view. We should very quickly be leaving Laythe's sphere of influence. We have a little bit of time to stay in Joule's system view. So we'll stay here for now until that exits Laythe's sphere of influence. And we'll watch it as it leaves Joule's. Good. Keeping an eye on that apoapsis, making sure we don't have any other encounters along the way. It's almost time to go ahead and zoom out so we can prepare to watch that descend back down to Kerbin very quickly because of the thrust to weight ratio there. Just watching for that encounter. There it is. Oh, we barely missed it. Okay, let's go back to retrograde. So much easier where we are so close to Joule now and orbit around Laythe. Let's put our focus on Kerbin and wait until that lines up with the retro mark. We will cut the thrust limiter down to about a quarter, about 20, 25, and then let's get that encounter. Once it's there, let's update our quick save. Then we need to time warp until we are out of Laythe's sphere of influence so we can see where we are going to be relative to Kerbin, which it should show us right about now. Let's cancel the time warp and zoom in on Kerbin. We have a little bit of a correction that we need to make. Let's burn normal to bring that periapsis down. I believe it should be normal. Let's check our delta V. About 600 remaining. We may end up having enough delta V left once we return to Kerbin to finally land on the northern pole for our Kerbin return. It'd be really cool to do that. Alright, let's see if that brings us down. Okay, looking good. Let's go to full throttle. Make sure Kerbin's orbit is flush with itself. Let's get rid of that communication network line so we can see that a little better. Once it's flush with itself, we just need to bring the periapsis down to Kerbin's line. It's a good thing we still have our thrust limited because it would be zipping down at full throttle if it wasn't. Once that's there, we will cut the throttle right about now. And we're not going to do a polar insertion. We're going to make sure that we make orbit around Kerbin first, and then adjust that from there so it's not a crazy 6,000 to 8,000 meter per second entry burn. But we are ready to make our way to the Kerbin system. Let's try to bring that line in a little bit. I believe we actually need to be facing prograde though. And we should probably bring that thrust limiter down as close to 0 as possible. Let's try 5 for now. See what that does for us. Close to 5. Almost looks like we're leaving Kerbin over there. And that almost looks like Minmus around Kerbin. Alright, anyways. Let's try to bring that... Okay, we need to be pointing retrograde. We just lost our encounter. pretty quickly too. Let's reduce this closer to 0.66, that'll work. Once this is pointing retrograde, we will get our encounter back and bring that down close to about 100,000 meters relative to Kerbin. Yowza, we have a little bit more of an inclination change going on here. Let's bring it to about there and point ourselves back to normal again. We're going to have to keep bouncing back and forth between retro and normal until we nail this down. May not even be able to get it perfect, but we'll try. Alright, let's begin to burn that down if possible. Let's increase our thrust limiter on this engine a little bit more now again. And then continue to burn that down a little more quickly. That's actually on the side that we want to be coming in from, so that's good. Let's continue to burn that down just a wee bit more though, until that line's a little bit more stable and even. Then we'll point back to retrograde. And while it's reorienting, let's bring this back down below 1, close to 0. Once it's locked onto retrograde, let's continue to try to bring that line in. Youch, okay, let's go prograde. See if we can reduce that thrust limiter just a wee bit more if possible. A little better than 0.6, if we can. 0.15, fantastic, let's keep that. And we'll lock on to prograde, good. And let's bring that on in now. That's looking a lot better. That'll be a little easier to work with. 87,000, we'll take it. Let's quick save. And we will activate our time warp manually first until we are out of the Joule system. Barely affected it, brought it up to 92,000 meters. That is okay. Let's go ahead and leave the Joule sphere of influence. And once we reach that point, we will set it to automatically warp closer to Kerbin. We'll begin by coming in, let's see, should be clear of Minmus, should not affect us much at all. So let's warp a little closer to the Mun. See, we still had our time warp enabled, so it should not have affected our periapsis at all. Let's take a look-see there. 92,000, good, okay. A little bit longer of a trip home than our prior return trips, but that's okay. Just means that we're going to have less speed to worry about once we arrive, probably. We should be arriving within the next couple minutes or so. About 3 minutes, maybe. So here is the game plan. Let's check our Delta V. Plenty left. We need to make sure that this is open and ready to kick the thrust limiter back up to full capacity. And we will still have roughly 5,000 Delta V after we are done with this stage. That's plenty to pull off what we are trying to do. Let's check our thrust to weight ratio and all that. 0.62, 0.62, but it is at 2.25 here. What we could do, if we really wanted to, is dump this fuel and this fuel into this tank, kicking it back up to about 1700 by 1800 or so, fairly close, giving it a great deal more Delta V, and once we kick these stages it'll only add more. And we can use the thrust to weight of this mainsail engine here to help us burn normal and raise our degree of inclination up to the polar mark. And it'll also help us make our orbit faster if we want to, because the thrust to weight for these Terriers with these FLT800s not too good. Same with the Wolfhound, with all this fuel, kind of maximizing the weight versus the thrust ability of that Wolfhound. Still a 40-second burn there, and the two outer stages. Well, the two outer stages will last for 40 seconds. And then once we decouple those, the central Wolfhound stage will last for about 254 seconds. This stage only has enough to burn for... Okay, that's way off, because the thrust limiter is down. We'll get a better beat on that once we arrive here in about 40 to 50 seconds, before we decide what to do. Let's go back to our map view, exit warp mode so we don't affect that. Let's prepare to see what it's going to be like once we get closer, if we're going to have to deal with the mun or not. Depending on its location, we could get grabbed up by it, but I think we'll be okay from the looks of it. You just never know, though. Let's reactivate our comm network for future episodes and so on. Get a good look at that comm network while we have time, to see how much that is expanding. With our conquering of Eve, except for returning from the surface, we haven't gotten that contract yet, thank God. We have conquered Duna completely. We're only 2 moons away now from conquering Jewel, and we'll have Moho and Drez and Elu remaining. We're well beyond the halfway point in the tutorial series now, outside of Easter eggs and rovers and stuff like that, all the extra stuff. We are very quickly approaching Kerbin now. Let's try to get a good view of that. Try to find it real quick. There it is, and there's the mun. Oof, awfully close. Let's see. I think we'll be okay though. Let's focus on our vessel. Oh yeah, we're gonna be good. Alright, now let's get rid of that comm network a bit so we can see our line there a little better. Yeah, we're gonna have to completely get rid of it. Alright, now, we're only coming in at about 3,000, that's not bad. As expected. Let's raise the thrust limiter back up on that. Okay, that changes our burn time to 20 seconds. It's enough to help make orbit, and then we can use that for polar. Really don't know if I want to transfer that fuel. Let's find out what would happen now. Set that to N and this one to N. Let's get rid of all the fuel in those stages. Barely even adds any more delta V to it. Let's go ahead and dump that fuel back out into this. We'll just use that for an orbital stage, and we'll use the 2 outer stages to help assist in the normal burn to go polar. And hopefully we can land on the North Pole this time, returning from Laythe of all places. Once this is done, crazy that it didn't take much time to dump all that fuel into the larger tank, but it's taking longer to return the fuel from the larger tank to the 2 smaller outer tanks. But we are there. Let's go ahead and prepare to time warp over to the periapsis. That'll give us a couple minutes. That'll be good. Let's prepare to point retrograde and be ready to make our orbit around Kerbin. As soon as that hits retro, we're going to need at least probably 30 seconds to do this. So we'll be warping to about there. That'll give us about 40 seconds, give or take. And let's go ahead and warp. And then as soon as we arrive, we are going to go full throttle. Once it's in line with that retro again, right about now. Should be staging here in about 10 more seconds, I'd say. Let's get ready to do that. peri-abscess. Make sure it doesn't dip down too low though, as we are approaching it and burning retrograde. Let's very quickly now stage. Just waiting to see the Kerbin escape get cancelled out. It's going to take a good bit of burning to get there though. I think the escape velocity of Kerbin should be close to about 3,500 meters per second or so. We can find out that. Let's put our focus on Kerbin and find out. Escape velocity is 3,400. Okay. Alright, so we're just waiting for that to get close to 3,400. Oh, that's right, this one's missing one of its fuel lines. Ha! Okay, let's dump some fuel into this as we continue to burn. So that's about twice as much as the other fuel tank. We'll stop it right out there. It should burn a little more evenly that way. And we should definitely have Kerbin orbit by now. Keep an eye on that G-force meter. We know that one of those stages is out now. We can just let the other one slowly burn its way out while it moves fuel in. Stop it there. That'll be alright. We'll just let it slowly burn like that now that we have warped around Kerbin. Don't want to bring it in too much though. Let's see, those are both out, so let's cancel that and stage. And we'll burn away from them. And now the fun part. Let's try to go to the North Pole. We are going to warp down here to our apoapsis, a little beyond it, and then point ourselves normal upon arrival. And we are still focused on Kerbin to get a good view of this. Now that we have arrived, wait for that to point normal, and begin to rotate that. Should have been anti-normal to be honest, but we'll roll with it. But we're so far away from Kerbin, it's a little easier to adjust this. Let's also keep an eye on our fuel. Now we have plenty of delta V, like 4,000, yep. Once that's in line with the pull, it'll be a 270 on its HD degree or degree of inclination. Once it's at 270, we will kick it off. Right now, it's pretty close. Let's keep burning it a little bit more. There we go. Alright, now, let's warp back to this peri-abscess. Make sure that we are prepared to burn retrograde. And we will bring that apoapsis in a little bit more upon arrival. That way we can really control how we're going to land. As soon as it locks on, we're going to go full throttle. Right now. Bring that down as close to 96,000 as possible. So keep an eye on that delta V. We have about 3 minutes of burn time remaining. Let's close all that additional information, just so we can only see the delta V now. Still 12 seconds of efficient burning. Once that's close to 96,000, cut the thrust and warp around till we're close to the northern pole and continue our retro burn in surface mode. Kind of like how we landed on the surface of Laythe just a bit earlier in this episode. And it's about time for that to wrap around. Let's let that happen. And then we will warp a little ahead of the northern pole, or a little behind it, I mean. Let's warp over there. We have enough delta V to completely kill off our velocity, but that will take a couple minutes to do. As you saw, once we went around the southern pole, our nav ball shifted in a very unusual way. It's going to do that the whole time that we're landing. Okay. Now, let's try to move a little closer to that northern pole. Let's try to get ourselves right over top of these mountains here. So we want to warp to about here. And as soon as we arrive, let's begin burning relative to the surface retrograde. And we want that line, just like we did at Laythe, to be close to the tip of the North Pole here. Once we achieve that, we will know that we will be good to land at the Northern Pole. Let's begin closing our stuff up. Looks like it's just the solar panels to worry about. Close those. Let's reorient our vessel. Looking good. Should be close to the tip of the North Pole now. But where are we? Right over top of it. We'll just keep on burning, killing off as much speed as possible. It would be very groovy to land right at the tip. Right on the very tip of the Northern Pole. You can try to do that. You can see it there from this angle. So that means we need to have our descent line about here. So we still have about 5 seconds or so to burn until that's where we want to. Get as close to that tip as possible. Looking good. We should honestly be able to see where that is. It's a little difficult to see though, but it's probably somewhere like right around there. Let's refocus on the vessel. There, you can really probably see it now. Let's go ahead and bring that line towards right over top of that. That's our altitude. We are close to entering the atmosphere. We have about 1200 meters per second of delta V left. And at this speed, we're not going to have much of a burn in our re-entry. I'm going to try to get that right on top of that spot. This would be very cool to land at the most northern tip of Kerma. That's pretty close. At the risk of destroying the vessel coming in through the atmosphere, I'm going to go back to orbit mode and try to get that lined up a little better, because I really want to see that happen. Right about there. Let's point prograde real quick to try to extend that just a wee bit. Maybe radial out, actually. Before we pick up too much speed and start burning in the atmosphere. Right about there. That looks pretty darn perfect to me. I'm going to extend it out just a wee bit more though, because I know we're going to burn off speed and land a little earlier. Now let's point back to retrograde relative to the surface. Let's come in hot. Once it's down to about 30,000 meters, I'm going to kick the time warp and activate the engine to try to burn off more speed to make this a little more safe. Be prepared to enable the drogue chutes before we're done here. Do it at about 20,000 right about now. And we need to make sure to kick that engine right as soon as it's done, like that. Let's check our line, see. Looks like we are going to land almost spot on perfectly to that northern tip where all those lines are converging. That's fantastic. Just waiting for those to fully deploy, then we'll activate the main chutes. It's going to be close to sea level before landing. So that should be exploding right about now. Once this gets down to about 500 meters, I'm going to cancel the time warp and activate the main chutes. So hard to see the surface though. 500 may be a little too close. Nah, should be fine. And 500, let's activate those main chutes. Once those are fully deployed, I'm going to start grabbing some science very quickly. Log the pressure reading, may not be able to get anything, nope, but the temperature reading should be good. If I can get that very quickly, because we need to grab some more stuff. Let's check crew report real fast. Let's grab that. EVA or engineer here. Grab an EVA report from over the northern pole. And very quickly get back into the pod and deactivate the SAS and let this thing land. Say goodbye to that heat shield probably. Nope. Cool. Alright, let's EVA headwig here. Or hellwig, sorry. Let's get the surface sample from the northern pole, northern ice shelf, then we'll get the EVA report. And since she is our scientist, she can get this gravity data and then take it. How about that seismic data? Need to climb up a little bit maybe? Yep, okay. We lost it. Let's climb up a little bit more again and very quickly grab it now. And then we'll take it, get that pressure reading, and then take it as well. And then if I'm not mistaken, we need to first take the temperature data, and then we can log it again. And take it from the surface now. And then we can grab our crew report to free up some space, get back in the pod, and then do the crew report from the surface. That puts us at 21 pieces of stored data. Let's check out our accomplishments. There's the Laythe contract fulfilled, and once we recover we'll have that part, or that contract fulfilled. And we have returned home from a flyby of Laythe and orbit of Laythe. Very good. Let's go ahead and recover the vessel now. And see what's in store for us in the next episode. And I've only got about 40 seconds of time to spare, so I may extend this episode to prepare for the next mission, depending on what it is. A bit of science from that. We're made a good bit of profit, bringing us up 2 million more in funding. They are maxed out in their levels now. And that completes the Laythe contract that was left over. Let's now update our quick save. And just out of curiosity, let's go to the administration building, go to research rights sellout, max out the commitment. It's about 500,000, that's not bad. Alright, let's go to our contracts and mission control. We're going to BOP. We don't have to land on Laythe yet. Fantastic. Flyby BOP. Doesn't even say anything about returning from BOP. Interesting. Alright, let's accept that contract and see if there are any other BOP related contracts. Not seeing any. Anything else we want to take? Not seeing anything else. Nope. Alright, so we're just going to Bop. And that means we have a, well, let's go take a look at Bop. And also get rid of the remaining, debris that we have out in space. We already have all the vessels that we need for this mission ready, so we can just launch in the next episode. If I'm not mistaken, we'll have to review that though. Alright, let's get rid of this debris real quick, then we'll go take a look at Bop. And since those probes had outlived their purpose, we should leave them there for now. Not sure if I left the ones at Eve or not. Oh, we got rid of the ones that landed on Eve. Might as well do the same thing to the ones at Laythe, since they no longer have a purpose. Splash down at Laythe. Let's get rid of you. And let's get rid of the one that landed at Laythe. We have a station around. Alright, we have a relay around the Mun, relay around Kerbin. Don't have one around Minmus though, do we? Huh. We have one around Duna, a station in orbit around Duna, a relay around Ike, a station around Ike, a relay around Eve, a habitat landed at Eve, a station that we returned from Eve that is now in orbit of Kerbin, station around Tylo, station around Val, station around Laythe, and we're heading to Bop. So let's look at Bop. Here is Bop. Now this is going to be a very interesting episode, because actually right around where it's lit right here and the light, right around here is where we're aiming. There is another Easter egg we are going to cover, ironically also around Jewel, on one of its Muns. One of the arguably most special Easter eggs, probably more important than the one that we covered at Val. I just happen to like the one at Val more, but this one probably is more important. One of the most important ones in the game, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, we're going to be going out to Bop and checking out that Easter egg. Let's check out some information about Bop. Bop is a small moon in the vicinity of Jewel. In Kerbin mythology, Bop is believed to be the home of the Kraken, a mischievous creature said to play with the ships of hapless explorers by spinning them out of control until torn asunder, then casting them into oblivion. Oh boy. Let's check out the parameters and characteristics. No characteristics, no atmosphere. Parameter, the gravity, very low. Very, very low. Almost akin to, say, well, let's find out. Somewhere that we've already been. It's 0.06. Already been to Minmus, it's 0.05. Very close to Minmus there. Yeah, very close to Minmus. That's the most comparable one. Let's see, the escape velocity is only a mere 276 meters per second. SOY is 1,200 kilometers or 10,000 meters. Or 12,000 meters. Definitely want to be at least 15,000 meters in orbit to be safe, because if we get rid of this, we can rotate. Quite the jagged surface it has, with varying degrees of altitude, especially over here on this side. But we are going to be put into a relatively diagonal near polar orbit, which should make us safe from all but this area, I would say. But eventually we'll cross paths over top of every bit of the surface if we continue to orbit. We're going to make sure to put our station in an equatorial orbit, undock, and kind of like we did with Val, just go normal burn until it's in line with our destination, land, and then leave and come home. And that'll be in the next episode. Let's leave the tracking station and review the vessels we are going to use for that. Let's see, we'll do the flyby, orbit, and return mission first to place the station in orbit so we can have relays there. And then we'll send the other vessel out. And we won't need anything too special for this, so we'll send the KSS-3A out for this, I would say. That should be fine. And then we will send the J2A, I want to say, out for that one. Let's see. Is it the J2B? No, J2C. I think it is the J2C that we're going to be sending out for that one. J2C. Let's check out the J2A and the J2C before we decide which one is going. And then we're going to end the episode because there's nothing for us to prepare for this mission since we already have the vessels ready. We'll just launch out and put that station in orbit as explained, and then return. And if there's time, we'll go back out and dock up with that station and prepare to land, probably in the following episode after that. Now let's open the J2A and see what we have to work with that. And if it's not really ideal, then we'll send out the I believe it's the J2C or the B, I'm not sure which one, but we'll find out. It's good to have all these vessels that we've created still safe so we can just do some quick loading and launching instead of having to work on these now for future launches. Okay, so the J2A, that was the deorbital assistant module that we had for Tylo. So we're not going to be launching that one out the BOP. I guess it's going to be the J2B, if I remember correctly. We'll find out though. We already know that it's the KSS-3, I think it was the A, right? Let's see. The KSS-3A is the one that we're sending out to orbit, deploy the station core, and return from BOP. And I'm going to guess it's the J2C that will be sent out to do the BOP land and return mission, to check out that Easter egg while we're out there, and knock another one of those off of our to-do list. Just waiting for the J2C to open up so we can confirm that's the craft that we're sending out there. Should be opening here any moment now. 422 parts, lordy may. Alright, there it is. There's that beast of a vessel that we used for Tylo and what was the other one? Val. Yep, there is our BOP land and return mission vessel. I do want to very quickly also review the KSS-3A to make sure that that's going to be the vessel that we're going to send out to BOP in advance to deploy a relay station to have ready and waiting. As soon as all those vessels load up, let's hop on down there. The KSS-3A. Only 143 parts, 250,000 credits just about. Not bad. This one's double that, almost. So it'll be a close to $800,000 mission in total. We're going to get quite a bit more than that back, though, after all is said and done. Just waiting for this to load up now. Here in about 5 seconds or so it should be loaded. Not too many parts. There we go. Oh boy, that one doesn't have the command pod on it. Where is the one with the command pod on it? We need to find out for sure which one this is going to be. Maybe we could still do that, and it is going to knock out the flyby, orbit, and return from both, either way. And this will leave some leftover fuel just in case it's needed for the return. You know what? That might be a good idea. So we may go ahead and do that instead of returning from the flyby and orbit, which will knock our mission time down to where we can probably do both of those in one episode. In the next episode. Don't want to extend this one out for too much longer, so just in case, gonna check out the let's check out the KSS3. Looks like that's the one that does have the pod. It should be exactly the same as the KSS3A, except it has the command pod for the return after deploying that station. The KSS3B, the only thing different is it has the 2 probes. So there it is, KSS3. This is designed to deploy this station and then return home. The KSS3A is designed to get rid of the command pod and make this into basically a fuel station once it's deployed and not set up to return. And then the KSS3C is the same as this, designed to return, except it has 2 probes attached to these sides. Alright, so now we know what we are doing. It may be in our best interest to send out the station by itself without the command pod to make it a flyby, orbit, and return mission. We can just fly that out there, put it into orbit, and leave it there with all that fuel just in case we need it for the return mission from BOP, though I doubt we will. And then we can launch the J2C. What was B? Let's find out real fast. We can launch the J2C out there to dock up with that, and then land on BOP, check out the Easter egg, do our breaking ground science, return to orbit, dock back up, refuel if necessary. If not, we don't have to dock back up at all. We can just return to orbit and come home, and that'll work. There's the game plan for the next episode. Let's make absolutely certain all of these are good. Okay, there are no more BOP related missions or contracts to take. That'll wrap up this episode. Let's update the quick save, update the main save, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Hope it's been helpful. Hope you've been enjoying the journey, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.